Good afternoon, everyone. So we want to start now. Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to our FAIR AI Symposium here at Graz University of Technology. It is my great pleasure to see many colleagues, collaborators, our guest speakers joining us today. I am Ilira Hassani Mavrice, and I lead the research data management team here at TU Graz. This symposium is organized under the scope of cluster research data in a close collaboration with all our project partners in shared RDM project. We have put together a very rich and engaging program, and in my opinion, we have tackled very essential topics and very timely topics, such as fair research results, trustworthy AI, and the evolving research infrastructure landscape. I think many of us agree that FAIR principles, they serve as a very good foundation for open science, for research data management, but with AI being integrated in many workflows in our research, such as creating data, managing data, or also using data, the question is, are these principles enough if we just consider them as such? On the other side, we also know that AI is bringing a lot of opportunities to enhance fairness of research results. Such opportunities are, for example, the automatic metadata creation, the semantic enrichment, or the enhanced discoverability. But another question is, are we able to leave very important aspects such as bias detection or ethical responsibility to machines alone? I'm very happy that this symposium brought together the researchers and experts, legal experts, infrastructure experts that will explore these questions. With that, I would like to thank you for your participation. Especially, I would like to thank our guest speakers. Some of them, they really had a long journey to reach Graz. I wish you a very engaging event. Please try to exchange your ideas, to engage in the Q&A sessions, and use the networking opportunities today. It is now my pleasure to invite to the stage and give the floor to our Vice Rector for Research, Andrea Höglinger.
Good afternoon. I just thought I may be a bit underdressed in relation to Iliri. Sorry for that. Yeah, Iliri, you have already mentioned the most important aspects, and for me it's really a great pleasure to welcome you all to TU Graz, here at our aula. For whom is it the first time here in our aula? Oh, that's great. I hope you will enjoy the whole afternoon here. Yeah, and I'm very open, and I'm very delighted to open this event on dedicated to fair data, trustworthy AI, and I mean that's going into the direction of the future of our research ecosystems. AI is still playing a growing role in research processes, and that's combined with the importance of fair data principles, and I think the importance of fair data principles is also increasing in line with the importance of AI. Transparency, shareability, and trustworthiness are policy priorities at the European research area, but also here at our university. I think all these terms, trust, shareability, these are really keywords when we talk about condition of excellent research. I'm extremely happy that we have very strong team here at TU Graz, and Elire, she's heading our research data management team, and she works closely with colleagues from other departments, and we have really a strong team, and you have already addressed the different expertises needed to have a strong data team, and I'm very happy that we have such a team here at TU Graz, and their key goal is to support and enable our researchers to manage, share and reuse their data, and that in a very efficient and effective manner. Yeah. At the national level, there's this close cooperation in the cluster research data project Elire has already mentioned, and I think that's such a great opportunity to share experiences, to exchange, to combine resources and to find new possibilities how to address with these new challenges combined with AI and FAIR data. And I would also like to thank Sabine Neff. Here she is here. Thank you very much. I think you both are an excellent example how cooperation across universities can be of benefit for all of us. Thank you very much for your strong and close and trustworthy cooperation. I thank all of you that you are here today, and I'm sure that this afternoon will bring you new insights, but also for us that we get new ideas how you deal at your organizations with fair data, with trustworthiness, with AI in general in relation to research processes. I wish you a wonderful afternoon here in our aula, and I just see that the weather is also wonderful. I don't know, do you stay, how many of you, or maybe some of you will also stay overnight, and I wish you a wonderful stay here in Graz. And all the best for this afternoon, and see you soon again. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you, our Vice Rector, for the opening words. And now it's my pleasure to invite on stage my colleague Sabine Neff from TU Wien. So she's coordinating the cluster research data.
First of all, thanks to TU Graz for hosting this meeting. As a result of the cooperation with TU Graz in general, with the project Shared ADM and the cooperation within the cluster of Forschungsdaten, I may keep the German name, please. The cluster was formed to gain synergies between projects which were funded by the ministry, and now over the 5 years of cooperation it really developed to an active network where interdisciplinary expertises in the field of research support are shared, findings, materials and tools are bundled, information about activities and things going on is provided, and networks are really interlinked with each other. And within this network of Cluster Forschungsdaten, we really try to work future-orientated to tackle the challenges in the context of digital technologies and infrastructures for research, to face present problems but also future problems, and to make our findings more visible and easier to find, and also to give ongoing information about activities. We at the moment are redesigning our website. Hopefully it will be released at the beginning of next year. And last but not least, I want to mention that the Cluster Forschungsdaten is open for new members. Why? Because we want to strengthen this network. We want to bring it on a future-orientated way, and we want to be sure that we cover all the needs of the community and address them as one topic with AI we do today, and we want to ensure that we do this in future as well. So please feel free to contact me during the day. I'm here, and yes, enjoy the day.
Thank you, Sabine. And now I would like to invite two my colleagues on stage, because you already heard this is a collaborative effort. And I'm very happy that Suvini and Livia will be moderating today's event. They will be guiding us through the program, introducing the speakers, and also moderating the Q&A sessions. They are based at TU Wien, and they work at the Center for Research Data Management, so the team led by Barbara Sanchez. So please, Suvini and Livia, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you very much. So today we will be taking kind of turn-taking on this moderation.
Going back and forth?
Yes, so you start.
I start. Okay. Thank you very much. We are very happy to lead you through this day. First of all, we would like to have a look at the agenda for today. So if we could move on over here. Thank you. So we start off with two very interesting keynotes, which provide us with the researcher's perspective. First of all, we have Jana Lassner, and then we have Daniel Gierecho, and we are very happy to see their input. After each of these presentations, there's going to be a Q&A, and I'm very happy for you to extend your input, explain your research yourself. Please always introduce yourself if you have questions to ask, and we're looking forward for a lively discussion afterwards. Then we move on to a coffee break, again for you a chance to mingle, and come back to a lightning talk. There's going to be 3 lightning talks. And after each of these 15-minute presentations, there's going to be a Q&A again. Also here we will focus more on infrastructural challenges as well as legal best practices. And also have a little surprise for you at the end. And then we will move on to another coffee break. This time there's going to be even more snacks. And I hope you can have a little back and forth with your colleagues and also with your experts. And then there's going to be a breakout session. Within these breakout sessions, they're going to be led by Alira and Sabine. And you yourself will get to work on certain concepts, FAIR for AI and AI for FAIR. And afterwards, there's going to be a little conclusion and presentation on the concept you worked on. And then we will have a good wrap-up and do a little reporting on the day. Okay. So first of all, I would like to invite Jana Lassner to the stage. She's going to be our first keynote speaker. So Jana Lassner is a professor of data analysis at the University of Graz and leads the Complex Social and Computational System Research Group at the IDEA Lab. She holds a PhD in physics with research on pattern information, and now is employing methods from machine learning, data science, natural language processing, and computational and statistical modeling to understand how humans behave in socio-technical environments. Jana studies the spread of conspiracy theories and misinformation and the effectiveness of counter-speech in strategies online. Her research explores the impact of social media recommendation algorithms, and on society and its understanding of honesty. Jana is also an advocate for scientific integrity, open science, and systemic change in research culture. Let's warmly welcome Jana and look forward for an inspiring keynote. Thank you.
All right, thank you for the kind introduction. I'm probably the speaker that had the shortest path here. I only needed to travel 5 minutes by bike from the neighboring university. What I'm going to tell you today is Tales from the Trenches, a researcher's perspective onto using data, reusing data, sharing data with a specific connection to personal data. So data that is about humans. My research inherently touches humans. It asks social science questions, and that means our data is also about humans. And when we have data about humans, we need to respect data privacy rights. What I'm going to show you today is 3 case studies, research projects that I have worked on in the past or am currently working on, that all have to do inherently with complex questions around accessing and sharing data. And I'm going to try to distill learnings from each of these case studies that relates to today's topic, fair data and AI. And in the end, I'm going to give you a few future thoughts, but take this as just one data point, just one researcher's perspective. Research data management is not my field of study. I would consider myself a power user, but I have a limited perspective that I'm going to share nevertheless. All right. Presenter. Okay, this seems to work. Perfect. Cool. So this introduces my 3 case studies. The first one is about using natural language processing for mental health. The second one will be about a large-scale mental health data collection effort that we undertook. And the last one is about data access under the Digital Services Act. Let's dive right into the first case study, natural language processing for mental health. The idea here is that psychotherapists, when they are undergoing education, they need training in how to deal with patients. The current solution is that for the very fresh ones that you cannot introduce to patients, for the very fresh ones, you actually have human actors that are used to train psychotherapy with. This is, of course, an extremely expensive solution because you have to pay one-on-one acting lessons for these psychotherapists. And then there was the idea that, well, look, LLMs, large language models, are great at imitating humans in conversations. And actually, many psychotherapy contexts are texting-based by now. So you have psychotherapists working on emergency lines where they're actually texting with the patients. So why not use LLMs to do this first kind of introductory training of psychotherapists? So use LLMs to simulate human patients. Great idea. What is even greater, there is a lot of data already that we could use to prime these LLMs to imitate patients. Teaching hospitals actually routinely record counseling sessions, and they do get consent from the patients to use this data for training and educational purposes. And what's great about this is the transcripts that these teaching hospitals collect, they follow patients over multiple sessions, so you really have a realistic depiction of a patient and their development. So this would be perfect to create realistic patient personas that psychologists could then start their training on, right? Well, there is a catch. This is, of course, very personal data of people in very vulnerable situations when they undergo psychological counseling. It's health-related or mental health-related information, therefore it's the highest sensitivity category under data protection. And also, this data is almost impossible to anonymize thoroughly without using its value. Usually, the personal details that the patients disclose are sufficient to identify them, but also absolutely necessary to understand the situation. And what comes on top is that data sharing for machine learning purposes is not covered in the initial consent forms. So, as a result, 40 smart people, including psychologists and computer scientists, met for 5 days in a nice castle in Germany at Castle Dagstuhl. If you ever were there or are invited to go there, it's a great place to think important thoughts. Well, these 40 people met there and pondered how we could get this data to the actual AI scientists that wanted to fine-tune LLMs on it. And they thought about a solution, namely secure data processing environments. This seemed the only possible way to get this data into the hands of the people that had the technical knowledge to actually use it for AI applications. This initially sounded like a great idea that would solve all the data sharing problems, but in practice it turned out to be not very usable. Why? Secure data processing environments allow for a very restricted software stack. Usually, downloading software into the environment needs to go through an offline mirror of third-party libraries, so you prevent kind of access to the open internet, which is incredibly tedious to do with Python packages, but then all of the state-of-the-art AI workflows involve cutting-edge Python packages that are also not very stable and constantly developed. There's also restricted compute resources, and if you think about using large language models, locally, because of course cloud use is not possible with this type of data. You need some pretty beefy GPUs to run them on, usually also not possible in such a secure data processing environment. And on top of that, there is extremely high friction and long delays when it comes to onboarding people into the environment, and then also, for example, updating the software stack in the environment. So all these restrictions in the end prove to be prohibitive, and there is no solution. So there is this nice data, there's people who really would like to work with it, but they currently cannot come together. So I'd say in this case there's Research 0 and GDPR 1. I want to say here, I don't want to dunk on the GDPR. I am a fan. I think it's an absolutely necessary regulation, but as a person that has to regularly deal with personal information, it's also a huge pain in the ass. And we need to learn how to deal with it. So, second case study. Oh, actually, the learning from the first case study in a nutshell. So, when personal data is concerned, it is really crucial that you think about future access modalities, because they need to be anchored already in the consent forms when you acquire the data. And if they are not anchored there, it's incredibly hard to get additional access modalities into the data post hoc. Secure data processing environments are in principle a nice idea, but especially when it comes to involved AI workflows, they tend to not really work out. And then lastly, what exacerbated the situation was that the technical expertise and the expertise on the data were not unified in one institution or one group of people. So if the data holders actually had the expertise in setting up powerful data analysis environments, then maybe the secure processing environment would have worked, but a research hospital usually doesn't have the capability of setting up such a sophisticated and powerful analysis environment. Now, on to the second case study. This actually is not really related to any AI application, but I still wanted to show it because it provides kind of the other side to the first case study where the secure data processing environment did not work out. In this case, it did, but it still had some, well, I think interesting learnings at the end. So, what happens here? We have a research consortium of people that are interested in studying the mental health of researchers. This is an important topic because it turns out that in academia we do have a mental health problem. Symptoms of depression and anxiety are rampant. They're actually twice as high as in a comparison population. And we have some ideas why this might be the case, but in this study we really wanted to nail it down. We wanted to survey a large population of European researchers, ask them clinical questionnaires about their mental health, and then also do a fine-grained mapping of their working environment. How does their workload look? How does the leadership structure look? What do they spend their time on? And so on. This, of course, again, is sensitive personal information because we're dealing with mental health data. It's also very rich when it comes to demographic information. So if you know the gender and age and field and institution of a person, you're able to identify them almost 100% and know who this data comes from. And the issue here is that the demographic information, anonymizing it, directly trades off against the usefulness of this data for research. Because this is exactly what we wanted to get at. We wanted to know for which specific environments and people do negative mental health outcomes occur. And then, as an additional complication, we have a large consortium of researchers from, I think, 25 different countries that all want to access this data once it is collected. Researchers from countries that are outside the EU and researchers from countries that are not very well resourced. So it's not a solution to tell them, well, you can travel to this site where there is an access terminal to the data and you simply spend 2 weeks there analyzing it. This does not work if the data access is in Cologne and the researchers would need to travel there from Montenegro, and traveling there would cost them half a year of their salary. So we really needed a scalable, secure, remote access solution here. This time we had a plan. So we planned for this remote secure access solution from the start before even collecting the data, which is good. So we wrote it into the consent forms. There our bases were covered. We also started working with a data protection officer from the start, which is a very good idea, because they will tell you when you're doing something that you're not supposed to do. It's also a real time sink, because they will tell you when you need to do something that you're not supposed to. We also executed this plan that we laid out with the data protection officer. And it turns out that the execution evolved into an extremely complex and also iterative interplay of these aspects of anonymization, research questions, data protection requirements, and the technical capabilities of the data access environment that we wanted to use. So it was really an iterative loop of which data do we want to collect? How does that connect to the research questions we want to answer? Can we then share this collected data, or is it too sensitive? And in the end, even if all of this wasn't okay, we would run into an issue where the data access provider would tell us, this is all nice and good, but we're not going to host this data because it's too sensitive and we don't want this kind of responsibility. And this turned out into, I think, half a year of managing all these different dependencies before we could even start collecting the data. In the end, we managed, so we did collect the data. It is now online and accessible. You can apply for access to it. And access also works mostly. It still takes some time to onboard researchers into the environment, and after some initial hiccups, we got it pretty resolved. In the end, this complex interplay of the different requirements was handled by a single postdoc. Full disclosure, that was me. Yeah, I already told you, it was complex. But on the upside, once we managed to put this data online, there's really a lively interest of the research community to use it. So the data has been accessible for, I think, 10 months, and we have already 8 manuscripts in preparation that uses this data. So in this case, I would say it's research scores a point. The GDPR is manageable if you think about it from the start and really set up your processes to deal with it. What do we learn here? The cost of doing this and doing it properly is substantial. So I told you I spent about half a year doing nothing else than just this. So it costs a lot of time. It also costs money. In the end, we were extremely lucky to find a data access provider that hosts our data indefinitely, providing onboarding services and user management for a one-time payment of 10,000 euros. That works because it's an academic institution. It's the DZHW, so German Center for Higher Education Research, and they are publicly funded. But usually, you would not get the service for that cost. And here the question really is, what are the incentives to bear that cost? They are all on the side of the data provider. And in the end, we did it because we are very idealistic and we wanted this data to be accessible. But what do we get out of it in the end? We get acknowledgements in papers. And that's usually not something you can build an academic career on. I also observed that this all working out was highly dependent on me being there and me integrating all the relevant knowledge. So I learned a lot about GDPR, I learned a lot about data management, I had all the ideas about how to analyze the data already. But if I, for some reason, would have decided to leave the project, this would all have crumbled and nobody would have been able to take my role. And this is simply not sustainable with a fixed-term project employee. What now turns out, I only learned this recently, we submitted a data description publication to a nice journal for open access datasets, and now they tell us, you have a very nice data set, the description is great, you thought a lot about data protection, but sadly, the data protection measures you put in place, they conflict with our journal policies for open data access. So what do we do now? I think we will be able to work it out with this journal, but there are these cases when you deal with personal data. If you want to have rich personal data, you cannot simply put it openly on the internet. This is not possible under the GDPR, and you will have to make some compromises with the openness, putting it behind some data processing agreement, or at least like a consent banner where people need to promise that they're not going to try and re-identify the people, the data subjects. Well, but as I said, the upside of that is if you manage to pull it all off and if you invest the time, you will be rewarded by thankfulness of people who want to use your data. All right, and as an addendum, I also have a personal victory from this. I am the winner of the 2024 Data Protection Duplo of the Leibniz University of Hanover. In the end, I formed a very close friendship with the data protection officer there because she suffered as much as I did during this time, and we both learned a lot. And I'm very proud of this because data protection was not easy for me, but we managed to do it. All right, this concludes the second case study and brings me to the very last case study, which is also the most recent thing, and I'm still in the middle of it. It concerns data access under the Digital Services Act. Now, I'm going to start to tell you a little bit of background. What is this about? It is specifically about online platforms, and in my case, about social media platforms. Social media platforms, initially everybody thought, great, we're democratizing knowledge, everybody can read, everybody can post, awesome. But now it turns out that they tend to amplify extreme viewpoints, they contribute to increasing polarization and declining societal trust. They also tend to reduce political knowledge, especially if people are not looking for relevant information on their own anymore and expect to be presented by relevant information by default. And they also concentrate influence or attention in a small elite. So there's an increasing body of evidence that points to social media platforms as kind of the causal factor in these societal developments. And this has also been recognized by the regulator now, specifically by the EU. We now have the Digital Services Act that came into force about 2.5 years ago. And the Digital Services Act says that providers of such very large online platforms shall diligently identify any actual or foreseeable negative effects on civic discourse and electoral processes and public security. And then there are a few other categories, such as mental health and physical health and so on. And if these risks are identified, then the platforms need to take mitigation steps to reduce the risks. This is very nice. We have now risk reduction goals where the regulator identified these areas and said you need to do something about it. But in the end, this needs to be translated to very concrete mechanistic decisions that the platform takes. Which content is selected, how is it ranked, which content is shown to which person. And connecting these very abstract regulation goals to these very technical decisions, this is a completely open research field. Nobody knows how to measure the risk to civic discourse of a tweet. So we have a serious research gap in between. And this is something that the regulator recognized from the get-go and put in provisions for researchers to help the regulator enforce the regulation. So researchers are an integral part of the Digital Services Act, since they need to help the regulator to assess societal risks and then to also assess the effectiveness of mitigation measures. How do researchers do that? Researchers need to access data from social media platforms. And data access to social media platforms has been getting very hard in the last years. To public data and to non-public data, we never had good access. And this is why the regulator put in a specific provision in the Digital Services Act that allows researchers to access public and also private data of social media platforms. It reads that upon a reasoned request, providers shall provide access to data to vetted researchers, that means researchers that belong to legit academic institutions, for the sole purpose of conducting research that contributes to the detection, identification, and understanding of systemic risks. And these systemic risks are the risks to civic discourse, to electoral processes, to public security, and so on, and to the assessment of the adequacy and efficiency and impacts of risk mitigation measures. Now, what data are we talking about? This private data, this is extremely juicy data for a researcher like myself. So we're talking about individual level content exposure, for example. What content has a person seen at which time? This is data that we never had access to before. We're talking about data used to personalize recommendations. We're talking about results of A/B tests that the platforms conduct. We're talking about repositories of moderated content. Think about a ginormous training data set for your hate speech classifier, because these are all human-labeled examples of moderated content from the platform itself. So these are all data categories that are explicitly listed as categories that should be made accessible to researchers. Amazing. However, it's not that easy, because of course the platforms have somewhat legitimate concerns how we're going to use this data. They have concerns regarding their right to conduct their business and trade secrets that they don't want to share with everyone. And they're also putting forward concerns regarding data protection, because this is of course all personal data again. So individuals that use the platform, and they have some data protection rights that need to be respected. So to mediate this process, the researchers requesting data and the platforms making sure that the data request is legit, the EU has put up a platform, the Data Access Portal, where you can create data access applications. And these data access applications are pretty involved. So to make such an application, you have to know exactly what data you want to access, which is already the first challenge, because in many cases we simply don't know what data exists on the side of the platforms. So we kind of have to reverse engineer their data warehouses. And you really need to name here specific fields in the JSON that the API will give to you. If you don't do that, the platform will be like, no, we don't have that data. You need to provide a detailed argument on the necessity and proportionality of the data access in relation to the risk reduction goals that the regulator set out. And, of course, you need to provide a detailed description of the technical, legal, and organizational measures that you're going to put in place to mitigate risk to the data subjects. And this is a really adversarial environment. So we know that the platforms do not want to give the data. They are forced to by the regulators, but they already let us know that they're going to use the GDPR tooth and nail to fight these data access requests. And so I participated in a workshop a month ago in Brussels with the ERC that tried to convene all the people that are really on the forefront of trying to make this data access work. And somebody said that these data access applications are comparable in effort and scope to an ERC grant application. And having written an ERC grant application and a data access request, I can say this is not wrong. So this is seriously involved to really get access to the data. Why should we bother even doing that? Well, first of all, there's real societal impact to be had here. The last time this was possible, and actually the first time this was possible on a large scale, the Facebook and Instagram election studies that were published in 2023, they confirmed for example, the enormous segregation of content between ideological camps, really confirming this hypothesis that we've had for a long time, that people live in their own information bubbles and are not sharing an information reality on these platforms anymore. And then maybe as a motivator for institutions that need to give us resources to do these things, they also give very shiny publications. So the last time this was possible, this resulted in 3 Science, 1 Nature, and 1 PNAS publication from 1 data access. So there is a real price to be had here. What can I learn from this? I'm still in the middle of it, so my data access application hasn't even been sent out yet. I'm currently getting feedback for it, and I expect it to take about half a year until it's even processed, and it's extremely uncertain whether this will work, mainly because geopolitics has now also gotten involved. I don't know if you've seen it, but only this week the US announced that they're not going to reduce steel tariffs if the EU does not cave in on their regulation of digital platforms. This is exactly what they're talking about. They want the EU to not enforce this regulation in exchange for help to Ukraine, in exchange for reduction of tariffs and so on. And we do not know how the regulator will react to this. I've also learned that these data access applications require serious investment in terms of time, of my own time, but also in terms of infrastructure and processes, setting up secure processing environments at the institution, maybe even getting certification that certifies that your data processing environment conforms to certain security standards. And formulating this data access request really requires people to deeply understand all the aspects of it. The data management aspect, the data protection aspect, and also the research aspect. So for me, I'm lucky I learned all these things when I did the data management for the mental health survey. But I think this is really something that goes beyond what an individual researcher is trained for. This really requires experts that can integrate this very specific knowledge about data and about data protection. But a sliver of hope on the horizon. What I've learned from talking to the regulators and also from the digital services coordinators that enforce this or process these data access requests in the individual countries, they are all extremely enthusiastic about this to work. So they're all extremely supportive. They talk to us researchers. They really try to work out together how we could make this work. And this is a very rewarding place to work in, because you can really feel this is at the forefront of what is currently possible. There's great interest in making this work. It's extremely interesting, of course, also extremely challenging. So this, I would say, is the upcoming fight to watch. It's going to be research plus the Digital Services Act versus the GDPR. We don't know how it will pan out yet, but it will be exciting. So with this, I want to conclude with a few final thoughts that I'm going to distill from the 3 case studies. The skills that are required to manage these extremely complex access modalities to data that is sensitive and personal, they're really beyond the capabilities of individual researchers. I'm very happy that the role of research data manager or data steward is now becoming more prevalent at the universities, and I really hope that people that are enthusiastic about this data will also be able to integrate the GDPR requirements when it comes to personal data and help me formulate this data access requests in the future. What I see as a key skill emerging is to be very, very knowledgeable about anonymization techniques, especially when it comes to unstructured data. Something that is completely open to me is how can we ensure that text data is anonymous? I don't know. If somebody has a solution, please tell me. Because if we manage to make the data truly anonymous, then we get rid of all these pesky requirements under the GDPR. So this would really be a hack to be much more efficient. And the last point, maybe also addressing the regulators or institution leaders in the room, my perception is that if we manage to have professional and efficient and secure data management practices in place at our institutions, this can be a real competitive advantage. Think about what was possible with this one data access to Facebook data. If you manage to implement this in your institution and really enable your researchers to confidently access this data and get it and do research on it, you will be on the forefront of what is currently possible in this space. And with this, I want to thank you, and I welcome questions.
Thank you very much, Jana. This was very inspiring and also really interesting how to see how the analysis of complex social systems is intertwined with LLMs, and also how your kind of data analysis means that we need to have aggregated personal data, and how these I guess, data access requirements are inherently political. Are there questions from the audience? Please, we have a second microphone. Whoever wants first.
Yeah, so I have a question concerning the first challenge. When it comes to the computing environment, did you think about encryption? And the second thing is, did you think about something like preparing the environment and then cutting it off from outside access and putting in the data later on, something like that, so that you can process it then maybe?
I think we did think about encryption, but the issue was that the capabilities to fine-tune and few-shot LLMs with encrypted data are not there. So you would need to decrypt the data once it touches the LLM, and then you have the same problem again. And the second question was about cutting off the environment once the data is in there. I guess that in principle would be possible, but the data cannot leave the hospital. And so you would need to set up the environment there, and that was not possible because they simply lack the capabilities to pull this off. This would be possible in a computer science department, they could do it, but you can't transfer the data there. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for the talk. I was wondering, now that there is a lot of talk about data spaces, right? And where basically these are also means for people to share data and have contracts. Do you think this could agilize all this process of doing the information request, maybe through some of these contracts that would be negotiated automatically and then you would retrieve the data from the company?
So may I clarify, this data space means that you get the data like on-premise in the end, or would the data stay there?
So it depends on what it says. So in the contract, no, these are distributed environments where people can put requests on types of data, and then data providers may negotiate like a mini digital contract with it. I mean, there is a lot of buzz in this sense in the ERC right now with data spaces for agriculture and for medicine as well. So I was wondering if you were aware of this and if this was considered maybe as a solution.
I was not aware of it. I can give you two undercooked thoughts. The first one, that would be great if like the data access was streamlined and it would be clear what the process is and what the responsibilities is, because in my experience right now, it's always a huge fact-finding mission to even find out who can give me access and who is responsible for signing the forms. The second thought is, if the data remains in the enclave and they only have remote access, I personally have the experience that this is extremely restrictive to cutting-edge research, because you will not be able to iterate fast and to try many things in a short time. You will only be able to ever do things that are already proven and tested and you already know very well how they go. And this is in a strong tension with cutting-edge research, because most of the things we do are new and they will not work out the first try, and we need an environment where we can really try the cutting-edge things on-premise fast.
Thank you. And the other question that I had is regarding the data set that you said that you were working on a data publication for this data set that you cannot cite. So, because the journal had access, had certain restrictions. So what about just putting the data online using, I don't know, Figshare, Zenodo, or one of those, or would that not work either?
No, we are not allowed to. The data protection officer would kill us if we do that.
But through the data publication, you also get access to the data, no?
Yes, but through so it's gated. You need to like click a button on the website and then pops up a contract, and you need to like promise that you're not going to do bad things with the data, and then you get access.
Good.
And that needs to be managed by the data access provider that keeps track of all these like forms that were filled and the processing contracts that were signed by the people. This is a requirement that comes from the data protection side. We cannot simply make it open in the internet for everyone to access without any documentation. Yeah.
Thank you.
We would have time for one more question from the audience. Yes? please. Another one.
So I can ask a question that when it comes, you said that you have this problem of data and that it's not really anonymous. Did you think of synthetic data? So to create, let's say, data sets that are then basically usable by anyone or so?
We did think of it, and we did to some extent create synthetic data to enable prototyping. But so maybe I'm not up to speed with the current developments in this area, but I was unable to find an approach that preserves all the relevant conditional probabilities between the various fields in the data set. So this is a data set with, I think, 150 columns and 4,500 rows or so. And sure, you can make a synthetic data set that preserves the distribution within each column, but to make something that really has the conditional probabilities across the data set without revealing who the person is about, who the data is about, I was not able to find something like that.
Okay, so I can tell you maybe something later what I saw a few weeks ago. It might be of interest.
Yes, I'm very happy to learn. Cool.
Okay, so thank you very much. It sounds like you had a lot of work, and also my last question would be, on a personal note, what would you like to have as a support in this kind of research where you have this much work with doing data access requirements and applications? Is there an infrastructure you would wish for as a researcher?
I would really like to have a person that is a data manager and a data protection officer in one.
Okay, thank you very much. Then I will hand over to Zuvini, and she will introduce our next keynote speaker.
All right. Thank you so much, you guys. Our next keynote is Daniel Garijo. He is an associate professor. Yes, there he is at the Ontology Engineering Group at the Universidad Politécnica de Madrid. Okay, shorthand is UPM. His work centers on open science and semantic e-science with a focus on capturing the context and metadata of scientific software and computational experiments to improve their reusability and reproducibility. He has contributed to international standards efforts and initiatives including W3C Provenance, Code Meta, SciCodes, and of course the European Open Science Cloud. Daniel also co-leads the RDA FAIR for ML group. As such, his work on knowledge graphs and software metadata is widely used in both academia and industry. So please welcome Daniel Garijo.
Thank you for the warm introduction and the emphasis on the correct pronunciation of my name, which is highly appreciated. All right, so today I wanted to talk about about one of the topics of the workshop, which is FAIR for AI, and the different initiatives that we have seen towards from the community for trying to bridge the gaps that exist a little closer. So I wanted to start with this slide that I think will be familiar to most people attending here. The FAIR principles were introduced in 2016. I put the link there to the Nature paper, scientific data Nature paper that describes it. And it was an initiative also from the Force 11 working group. And we all know that these principles stand for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, right? So, there has been a lot of fuss about FAIR in the last years, especially in the European Open Science Cloud and in general in European Open Science Cloud projects. And before delving more in and even jumping into the initiatives on FAIR for AI and for FAIR for AI, I wanted to take a step back and maybe analyze why are we doing this, right? If the slide goes through, there you go. So the structure of the keynote is about three main topics. First, doing a little bit of a step back and analyzing the key motivations of FAIR that I think are important. Some of these have been highlighted by the previous previous speaker, which is great. Also, what are the multiple extensions of FAIR that we currently have? And finally, FAIR for AI, what are the current initiatives and challenges? So, welcome with me in a little brief walk down history lane. And, well, the first thing I wanted to do, which is to give you the question on whether FAIR is the goal or the means to an end. Because as it is right now, for many projects, they phrase as FAIR as an end goal, right? All things should be fair. But sometimes by doing this, we fail to communicate that FAIR, in theory, it's not the goal. It was there to support certain requirements, right? So how did we get here? By doing this, I hope that I can express or remember everyone what were the main two motivations behind FAIR. And the first one is what our previous speaker said, no? Which is improving scientific credit. If you're familiar with DORA, the San Francisco Declaration on Research Assessment, you'll see that, well, many institutions have now signed it, so even if you don't know, your institution may have adhered already to the DORA principles, right? And in here, what it's important, well, you can read the declaration on the link in the slide, but basically it comes out that we need to go from scientific assessment that goes beyond papers to also look into the data sets, software, and other digital objects that people produce, right? So emphasizing the data sets, for example, that our previous speaker was introducing. There are people that spend months and years working on these data sets, and sometimes these are even more important than many of the papers that describe them. So why not also include these important digital objects as part of the scientific curricula, right? And these, well, the DORA principles or the DORA declaration emphasizes that this is something that should happen. And at least in Spain, we see that slowly but surely this is starting to happen from some of the agencies, no? If you have been reviewing European projects, you'll see at some point that they have started also asking to stop looking at the citation indexes of the authors and look more about, well, other types of quality indicators, no? Including data sets and software. We have seen other open letters from the scientific community, like the Leiden Manifesto, or more recently, the Barcelona Declaration for Open Research Information, that emphasize either that we should not rely only on bibliometrics and that we should aim for openness of the research products that we produce, right? So I hope that by now I have convinced you that scientific credit is one of the motivations of FAIR. The other one is reproducibility. And there is this paper that I like to cite a lot. It's taken from, this slide is taken from a 2017 study published in Nature, where they did a survey of over 1,500 researchers in different fields of science. And basically the conclusion was that 90% of the respondents agreed that there was at least a slight reproducibility crisis, with more than half agreeing that the reproducibility crisis was significant. In addition, this figure, the one that is in the center, which is one that I like the most, because it says that at 60% of the people in different, at least 60% of the people in different sciences had failed to reproduce someone else's experiment, and at least 40% of the times they, well, at least 40% of the people had failed to reproduce their own work from the past. So does this mean that this always happens? No, it doesn't mean. It means that at least once they had failed to reproduce their own work. Why does this happen? I do not think that anyone here that is publishing a paper just does it in bad faith, right? It's just that sometimes people do not have the training or the resources or the know-how on how to put these resources in a persistent repository that will be there for later, no? Or down the line. Actually, I think there was another paper that says that more than half of the links that we see in academic publications stop working after a few months, right? So do these people do it because they, on purpose? I don't think so, but you know, the PhD goes away, the student graduates, people change departments, the project ends, and then all those URLs that you thought were going to be in a few years are not there anymore. No, that's why FAIR is very important, because the accessibility and versioning and identifiers are a big part of the principles. And that's how we come to FAIR, no? So now, the second part of the keynote is a little bit on the different flavors of FAIR. No? Now, FAIR was designed for data sets originally, but now we have seen different initiatives from the community in which that have extended the FAIR principles, for example, for research software, FAIR for RS, for FAIR and FAIR workflows, because workflows, in the end, if you look at them computationally, they are orchestrators that state where do we, apply long experimental records on data and software, no? So they tie together software dependencies and data dependencies to perform large-scale experiments. And FAIR, obviously, applies to those. We have seen the notion of research objects, which capture the context of a scientific investigation, tying together what are the data and software associated with a particular paper, and how FAIR applies to that. We have seen FAIR applied for semantic artifacts and ontologies with projects like FAIR Impact in the last couple of years, publishing a lot of guidelines into how to achieve this. And also for machine learning models, right? Now with FAIR for Email initiative that I'm co-chairing with other people on the Research Data Alliance, and I will introduce a little bit more about this later. So the thing is that for most of the initiatives, what we have seen to support the FAIR principles are FAIR assessment tools. FAIR assessment validators for data, software, ontologies, and others. These are some examples that you can play around if you would like. For data, for example, is the Fuji. It's a very known tool that you put the identifier of a data set and you will get an assessment report. Now there are libraries that you can also run as GitHub Actions for your code that will tell you how well are you complying with the FAIR principles, or even the one on the bottom that was created by my lab, and that given the identifier of an ontology will also get you a FAIR assessment report, right? In particular, I put the logo of the European OS Trails project because what we are working over there is that given this amount, this sea of FAIR assessment tools, what we want to come in or to improve is the transparency of this tool. That is, what are the tests that are being run, what are the metrics, and how do they tie to each other? Basically, to know whether we can compare two different tools or whether these tools are assessing completely different things, no? What do these tools produce? Well, they produce something like this. You will get an application, you put your identifier, you get some score according to the FAIR categories that you have, right? You get a score which by no means, is a proxy for the quality of the resource. It's just telling you how well you are following the FAIR principles according to the criteria of the designers of the tool, no? That's why transparency is very much needed. And then you will get a summary for each of the categories telling you what are the principles and what are the tests that are done for each of these principles. Now, they also include a little guidance, no? So these tools also tell you, in case you are failing one of these tests, what are the steps that you need to take in order to address that problem, no? And of course, well, this is all great, but it also has some limitations, no? And that these tools just check for the completeness of metadata and the accessibility of some of the principles, but they will not check the quality of the resource by any means. So in a sense, I put this this image over there here because I have a colleague that likes to say that FAIR is like a nice wrapping of the data sets, right? But you don't really know what's in there. The data set may not be very good, right? So that leads to the last part that I wanted to cover today, which is the initiatives on FAIR for AI. And I wanted to start with a small example. I don't know how many of you are familiar with common procurement vocabulary codes. Is there anyone that knows about CPV? No? Well, in a nutshell, these are, it's a very long taxonomy of descriptions of contracts that people use, that is used in common procurement to describe the contracts, right? So it's a very big taxonomy. Basically, if your city hall has hired, I don't know, a crew for performing road works on some of the roads of your town, they will spend an amount of budget, and they will use one of these codes that they have to manually label for when they need to report back this to the European Union, right? And catalogs such as the Europe.data.eu collect this information, no? Among many other things. So the example that I want to illustrate this with is that, okay, I want to automate this effort by doing a classifier that, given a description of a contract, will get me the code automatically, so I don't have to do it by hand. The first problem, what is it? Well, finding training data, no? And I know that some of these catalogs already have some of this training data. So I went to data.europa.eu, which is a catalog following the FAIR principles, and I put, I don't know if you can see it very well, but it's in the description, it says, find me CPV descriptions with the contract descriptions, right? And all the data sets are there, all the metadata is available, there is API access, which is great, but there is still very difficult to find the data that I'm looking for, because I think, well, all these results that I'm showing are not even related. They are just CPV descriptions with no tender data associated with them, which is not the data that I'm looking for. Why? Because I cannot do granular searches on the types of variables that I'm interested in a data set, right? And even when I find it, because I found it in the end by scrolling a little bit, it turns out that the problem is that only a few fractions of the data sets contain the data that I'm interested in. And all the other stuff, for me, is noise. Maybe for the data producer, it's very valuable, right? But for me, it's not relevant for what I want to do, which in this case is build a CPV classifier. So data sets need to be manually inspected. Also, data may be multilingual, which it depends also on the, well, if you put everything into the same set, there may be biases and other stuff that may be unaddressed. I may be finding duplicate values, incomplete values, and inconsistent annotations, which is perhaps the worst things that can happen when you need to train a classifier, because you need to know whether there was an agreement in the annotations for that for the labeled data. Otherwise, the classifier is not going to work very well. And all this work needs to be, well, done manually at the moment. So this is a challenge. FAIR has helped me retrieve a lot of stuff. In fact, if you see some of the results in the previous slide, it says 200,000 data sets, which is great, but getting the data that I want from all those 200,000 data sets is still tricky to do. And the thing is that if I give a machine learning algorithm bad data, I'm going to get bad results. It doesn't matter whether I use traditional machine learning, generative AI, which is LLMs and all in everyone. Well, maybe I will get more shiny results because they like to, you know, do a lot of stuff, or even agentic AI, you know? So with agentic AI, you get a lot of agents doing different stuff, but if the data is not good, the results are going to be bad. And here, the problem is that I have two quality issues, no? I have the quality of metadata as a main problem, and the quality of data itself, no? And FAIR, I think, it may help addressing a little bit the former, the quality of metadata, but FAIR and the quality of data, so far, is not related, right? I also put the credit to where I took the picture in case you're interested. So in AI, in FAIR for AI, I decided to divide this in two main types of initiatives. The initiatives that focus on data and the initiatives that focus on software, that is the machine learning model, right? So the initiatives that focus on data, dataset metadata, include well, some standards that you may be already familiar with. No? The W3C DCAT is a standard that was designed for dataset metadata. The catalog that I used just before, data.europa.eu, actually follows a W3C DCAT application profile by extending these initial models, so the results, at least at the metadata level, are a little bit more interoperable, even if you have some issues like I've shown you in the previous slides, right? Then you have schema.org. Schema.org is a web-based web-based vocabulary that has been used to annotate more than 1/3 of the web, and that includes also metadata for datasets, right? And the good thing about this is usually a snippet that you include in the landing page of the datasets. If you include in this snippet schema.org metadata, then search engines such as Google will harvest it automatically, and it will be easier for others to find in search engines. In fact, there is a dedicated search engine from Google, in case you don't know, which is called Google Dataset Search, and that is only targeted at finding datasets following this schema. If you go a little bit further into the detail, a very relevant initiative is Croissant ML, which has an excellent name, I love it, and is also a schema.org extension designed for describing machine learning datasets. In fact, it has been used to annotate more than 700,000 datasets coming from platforms such as Kaggle, Hugging Face, and Dataverse, right? And also OpenML. So if you are not familiar with this platform, Hugging Face is where the community usually goes to share their models and data. Kaggle is where people run their challenges and competitions, and OpenML is where people store their runs, right? These three platforms are massive in the area of machine learning, and what is very relevant about this extension of schema.org is that it includes a particular part of the schema is just for describing the columns associated in datasets. So for example, here I just put an example of a dataset that had a field called age, and it tells you that it's an integer, so you can do fine-grained searches on the columns of the datasets in there. And if you want to even go further, there is another schema, which is also excellent, that's called IADOPT. This is derived from an older vocabulary called the scientific variables ontology, and the problem here is that, well, if you have variables such as age, well, it's difficult that people are gonna name that differently, but maybe they will put years, or they will put A in the spreadsheet, no? So sometimes it's a little difficult to link all the datasets that are talking about the same variables because everyone is just using different conventions. With this initiative, what they have done is that they transform the variables in a mini knowledge graph that captures all the subtleties of the variable. So if you have a variable that is called something like sea surface temperature, they will have something to capture that this is the temperature associated with the sea, no? Because it's not the same if you are talking about the sea surface temperature than the temperature at any other surface. And this is a mechanism by using this vocabulary in which you can do so. Of course, it has a limitation, and is that generating these homogeneous-based representations homogeneously for everything, it's a little complicated to do. But they are looking into how can you use AI and LLMs to help doing this translation. And then I'm going to go now with the initiatives that exist for software metadata. One that is to describe software at a high level is the Code Meta project. So it's to basically create a vocabulary that will allow interchanging software metadata records between different registries, so you don't have to input the same information again and again when you are, for example, depositing your GitLab in Zenodo, right? The idea is that you have a code meta file living in your repository, and that all the metadata, whenever you want to do a deposit, gets lifted and propagated automatically, which is great. The good thing about this is that the metadata is also readable by humans and readable by machines, right? And one of the things that it really is taking a lot of effort in this initiative is that we are creating crosswalks between the different platforms, such as package managers, software registries that exist, coding platforms such as GitLab and GitHub and so on, mapping all the metadata equivalences between them. So, okay, well, here is code repository, here is source, here is another one, and then we are saying this is all mapped against code meta, which, by the way, is another schema.org extension. So everything, is tied together in a webby standard. There are also projects such as the EOSC this is it's the European Virtual Institute, for research software engineering. I think I said all the letters in the acronym. But basically, one of the things that this project is also aiming to do is lift all the work that has been done in software quality throughout the years to try to come up with a set of common indicators for research software, including those for fairness, those for security, those for, there are many, many, many indicators that have been proposed in the state of the art, but what we are also trying to do is put them together on their common platforms and giving the researchers the tools that they need to actually assess them properly. And with this, I get to the FAIR for ML initiative. So now that I've told you the initiatives for data and for software, there is this Research Data Alliance working group, in which I invite you to join if you're interested, where we are basically extending also schema.org and code meta to capture machine learning model metadata based on things that already exist. For data sets, we were going to do it, but we saw that we had Croissant, so we are going to rely on Croissant. So what this vocabulary introduces is a set of properties to describe the provenance of the machine learning models, so we can describe them appropriately and compare them, and to understand how a machine learning model was trained, and all the other metadata regarding, for example, ethical concerns that you may have with the trained model, how much CO2 was invested in creating the machine learning model, and so on. Of course, some of these things are self-reported, but these are the first steps towards capturing this information more accurately. And with emphasis that it is aligned with the Croissant specification. As with software, what happens is that now we see many platforms popping up that describe machine learning models in their own way, and part of the effort that we are doing is also mapping what are the equivalences between these platforms, like having a mini Rosetta Stone so you can see, okay, so in Hugging Face it's called this, but maybe in OpenML it's called that, and in Dome it's called whatever, right? And I wouldn't want to end without some challenges, right? These initiatives are great to ensure that you can find fine-grained dataset information, that you can compare model performance, or that you can inspect which datasets were used to train a model. However, data quality remains an issue. None of these initiatives share or address the quality problem. And detailed metadata quality still requires manual validation. This is an opportunity as well for AI for FAIR, because there are a lot of papers, a lot of documentation, a lot of README files that can be mined for information to automatically create some of these metadata files. Of course, with the appropriate inspection afterwards, because sometimes they put nonsense in there, right? And one important concern as well is that, yes, we may come up with all these metadata standards, but if we do not want authors to throw them back at our faces, we need to strike the right balance when requesting data from them, right? So I was putting here on the lower end of the slide the new requirements that this year were introduced at NeurIPS, which is one of the top conferences for machine learning AI. And now they require if you submit a data set, it must follow the Croissant specification. I know a lot of people were complaining about this because if you have never seen a JSON LD file in your life, then suddenly when you're rushing for submitting your paper, having this new extra requirement popping up will get people very disappointed. And if we get people very disappointed, they will start not wanting to hear about the Croissant ML or any of the other metadata metadata representations that we are offering, right? So, in conclusion, and with this I'm ending the talk, is that I think FAIR plays a key role in AI, both in metadata, in interoperability, metadata specifically when we are coming up with common standards, on search, like with detailed search with variable descriptions, describing the provenance of a resource, and in interoperability, both at data and metadata level. Quality is one of the key open research challenges that I think we need somehow to address as a community. I'll be happy to hear your thoughts here. And that in the end, FAIR is a means to an end. No? It's not the goal that sometimes is pushed as right now. In my opinion, I don't want to generalize, but I think that high quality data sets should be fair, right? Because if you have something that is of high quality, you want to find it and you want to interoperate with it. And just to bring a recent example is that, I don't know if you know papers with code. Are you familiar with this data set? It was an excellent data set where you had paper and code annotations made by a very big community. Many authors had helped populate this data set. And now if you go to this website, you'll see that the dumps are not available anymore. They have been ingested by Hugging Face, but at least I have not been able to find the dumps. You can only find them by going to the Internet Archive and browsing through previous versions. And now I know that Hugging Face is an open-ish platform, right? So they try to do everything open, but before I had access to regular dumps, now I don't. And I think this is a quality data set that, for not following the FAIR principles, because it did not have a DOI and it was not stored properly on whatever, it's gone, no? So we also have to learn some lessons from these kind of efforts that one day may be there, but next day they are gone, no? So in the end, FAIR is not the goal, and I think FAIR and quality should go hand to hand in our academic journeys. So thank you very much. I need to stay.
There's a blink, blink. Oh, there we go. Yeah, you gotta stay for the Q&A now.
Okay.
You tried to run. Thank you so much, Daniel. It was a lot of information,
It was.
a lot of schemas, lots of tools being introduced, and initiatives.
So I forgot to put the link to the slides, but I will be sharing, I will be putting them in Zenodo soon and sharing them, so in case you want to have a look.
I'd like to hand the floor to you guys. Any questions to start? Yeah.
Hello, I'm Patrick from the Institute of Science and Technology Austria, and my question is, what do you think where's the sweet spot as a librarian? For me, it's always the question how much I can ask a researcher to create metadata, where's still the understanding, and where's the point where they're saying, no, this is too much, I'm out. And I see it always, and what kind of support you hope maybe others can bring in that?
Right, so this is an excellent question, because I think if you ask scientists, they will say that they don't want to do absolutely anything, right? No, it's true, and I understand. They say, well, why don't you go and look at the README or why don't you look at my paper? I already put all the information that you're asking for, and it's there. So how can we support? We can support this with tools to help this transition. So we avoid the empty blank sheet, and that they only have to review, no? But of course, well, sometimes a minimal effort from their end is necessary. And I will say more. A way that I'm trying to influence this a little bit is that in some conferences we are also pushing for having badges to the papers that are submitted. So if they want to have the artifact availability badges, which is easy to do, they need to follow certain minimal steps, which is basically the data sets and code that they have been producing. They'll have to put them in Zenodo with a DOI and a license, so the reviewers can see that it's that. And it's funny enough, for the DAB and KDD, we did this effort this year, and I think a lot of people were aiming for the badges, and many people, a surprising amount, I'm not going to say how many, did it wrong. Only these two steps, which were like, if you produce a data set, just put in Zenodo and get a DOI and put the DOI in the paper. And if you have a source code repository, activate the Zenodo bridge for making a release and get the DOI and put in the paper. People will submit DOIs that would not resolve. Maybe they had reserved them. They would put links to source code repositories, but not the DOIs. So all sorts of things I've seen. And I think that this is where training also comes into place, no? That as part of the PhD programs, we really have to emphasize that this is part of the academic life and that they need to incorporate some of these practices. So it's a balance as well over there. I'm not sure if I answered or if I answered with a lot of other things. All right.
Anyone else?
Thank you. Thank you, Daniel, for the very nice keynote presentation. And you mentioned training several times, and you also teach at your university. Can you maybe share some best practices? How you combine all this knowledge and all this experience that you gather being involved in many international initiatives, and then you go back to your students, and what do you teach them? Or
so I have an answer. So I can tell you that Yolanda Gill, who was my former mentor, she's a professor at the University of Southern California. She created a very thorough tutorial that can go from a couple of hours to a couple of days, whatever you prefer, and that is called the Scientific Paper of the Future. And so if you go to scientificpaperofthefuture.org, all together, no spaces, you will see a massive slide deck that indicates all these best practices and what can you do to implement this in 5 minutes versus what can you do to implement this properly. By properly, I mean spending more time than 5 minutes. So I did not include it here, but scientificpaperofthefuture.org. I hope it's still up.
yeah, thank you.
But the slides are also in Zenodo, so I'm sure they will pop up. And these are excellent materials. Some of them I also adapted in some of my presentations because they are very, very good.
Thank you.
She's coming.
Yeah. The box.
Sorry. Another one that brought me just to the question. So, how much you're working together with your library in your institution?
But that's
these topics.
Very good question. Very good question. So I have a meeting with them next week, actually. I'm not kidding. And because right now I think there is a revision of the PhD program, and I really wanted to add a data availability section on our PhD thesis. Mm-hmm. And since apparently I'm the OSPO for the Open Science Project, I'm the Open Science Project Office myself. Apparently, for my institution, I wanted to get involved in the library to make sure that they give support for data sets and code and so on.
Okay. Just because most researchers from our experience often forgot that there's also possibility with this type of project or open science project to work together with the libraries.
Actually, it's an excellent point, because if you see some of the platforms that are popping up, and you think about it, how long has the library for your institution been running versus how long have these platforms been running? Like if you look at Hugging Face, it wasn't there 20 years ago. My library from UPM was there 20 years ago. So there is also this notion of trust that libraries should get involved in different types of digital objects, but sometimes it takes time also to convince them, budget, constraints, so on, right? What am I going to tell you, right? You're a librarian.
I think you guys are ready for a coffee break. So
we also have a little gift.
Oh, thank you very
so much to Daniel and Jana. This is for you.
Thank you.
This is for you. Thank you for offering your expertise.
Yes, please give it up to the keynotes, Jana and Daniel. Wow, okay. Please be my English, wow. Please be back at 3 o'clock. That's when our next lightning talks are kicking off. So,
have fun.
Enjoy.